Hello and welcome to Snide's Return, a tabletop roleplay podcast. My guest today brings something to our TTRPG table, more than just an essence of a game. We get a full experience. So regardless of if you've been living off the grid or on another planet, he provides us what is needed to morph and even transform our shared play together. Having worked with different animals, this particular renegade has a professional tale or two to tell, and is certainly more than meets the eye. We live on the edge and upshift to success as we welcome game writer, TTRPG content creator, YouTuber, and professional nerd, Bryan CP Steele. Bryan, welcome to the show.
Hello. That was probably the best, if not definitely the most professionally put together introduction that I have ever heard. That was awesome.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome to the show. Let's learn more about you, Bryan. How did you get into tabletop role playing games, please?
I started out really early. My older stepbrother and my cousin threw me into role playing games when I was like 7. More or less, I was just kind of rolling dice. You know, they were like, check out these neat little math click clacks, and what are you? I'm a dwarf. All right, that's cool. What am I going to do? I'm going to hit this thing with an axe. You know, it wasn't really role playing, but it definitely got me started and got me into like the concept of my own imagination. And then I just stayed as a gamer my whole life. Professionally, I didn't really kind of realize that it was ever an option until I would say late high school. I had a couple of pieces that I had written, put into high school magazine, the yearbook stuff, that kind of stuff. But it was fiction, and people really did enjoy it. And I kind of knew at that point that I wanted to write. So I just focused on, trying to get, fiction into, fanzines and stuff like that. Did some playtesting, some rules playtesting for a couple of small companies. And then in 2002, I lucked out at the right place, right time with the guys, the original crew from Privateer Press. We played a bunch of their games, loved it to death. They had me do a test piece to write some stuff. One of their staff writers left again, like I said, right place, right time. One of their staff writers left, and within about 3 months, I had met up with them and said, if there's anything that you ever wanted, if you ever anything you ever needed out of me, let me know. And they saw on my, I'm going to show my age, on my MySpace page, they said that they saw that I had done some writings. They said, can we do a test piece? And they liked what I had done. And they offered me a 70,000 word little contract gig that ended up being the original War Machine Prime. That was my first official publication in the industry. We won 3 Origins Awards for it the following summer, and I knew I didn't want to do anything else. This was my, whether it was writing fiction or later on, designing rules and stuff. I always I knew that the world of make believe was where my brain needed to be.
Yeah, and I'm so glad it is, because we'll touch on more why in a little while. But there was a bit of a jump there, if you don't mind me sort of trying to backfill the gap. Started at 7, dwarves hit things with sticks. Did you stay with a particular rule set all the way up until you sort of through when you took on professional?
I played primarily D&D of various varieties, but then as I started meeting other gamers, one of my best friends in the whole world, who was the best man at my first wedding, was I got it was like our first game of Rifts from Palladium, and it was the very first time I remember us sitting down at our friend Todd's house and seeing these books, and him just kind of plopping these books down. And one of them was, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness, and the other one had this big black robot with a skull face on it. And I was so thrown back by the idea of these things all could go together. But then, once we started to read it and get into it, and was like, so I can make anything I want. So Rifts was a big influencer on me very, very early on. All the way up until probably about 16 or 17 years old, when World of Darkness took hold. I was a big vampire fan. Did a lot of LARPing when I was in high school and early college. But Werewolf was always my baby. Werewolf the Apocalypse was. I loved Vampire. I played it probably the most, but Werewolf spoke to me more. I still adore that world and that facet. And fingers crossed. Hopefully, because Renegade is producing World of Darkness stuff. When Werewolf becomes something that can gel together for us, I hope it gets to no pun intended, sink my teeth into it a little bit, because that would be 17-year-old me's like dream gig, is to be able to do something with Werewolf. So
yeah, amazing.
And then miniatures games came on roughly the same time around high school. I got sucked into, like so many people, early 40K. I played exactly one game of the original Rogue Trader 40K before the next big box set came out. And when the next big box set came out, me and like 3 of my friends, that was it. It's like, nope, this is the game that we're going to play. And obviously, time has moved on, and a lot of us still play 40K, but it was, there have been so many other miniature games that have come, gone. And I mean, heck, now I'm the lead developer of one that's coming out next year. So it is all over the place.
Well, definitely things to steal your pun not intended, but now intended. Plenty of things to sink our teeth into there. And you mentioned there, Renegade, potentially all going to be working on a werewolf game. They've got the World of Darkness stuff.
I would love to. Obviously, it's nothing is set in stone yet. We're still, the Hunter just came out. Hunter the Reckoning just came out. And there is a lot of really, really talented people over on the World of Darkness side of things that Renegade, kind of watches out for. I just know that I have definitely spoke very loudly and often about how I'd like to be involved with Werewolf if I can be. So hopefully that will come together.
To steal a vampire fund, state your claim, maybe.
Yeah.
So do you? I normally ask this later, but with what you mentioned there, do you get to play much of these games still, with respect to your work, which I promise we will get to?
Oh no, it's okay. I would probably say that because of playtesting, a lot of what I play is what I'm working on currently. I get my locals together; they're all signed up under NDAs and whatnot, and so rather than playing our own games, a lot of times they're helping me out by getting playtesting done. But that being said, I'm in 2 D&D games still. That I run one, and I'm being run by another. And every once in a while, I would probably say maybe once every couple of weeks, we'll get together and throw some minis down on the table of some variety. But it's not as frequent as I would like, but it is still more than probably what the average person walking down the street, if someone was like, how often do you play games? I probably still have a much higher number than those people.
No, that's very respectable. And you mentioned there playtesting things, and your work with Renegade has helped create and release a new system. It's setting agnostic, not system agnostic. I think that's fair to say.
Correct.
So would you like to tell us more about Essence20 and this system, please?
I would love to. So Essence20 became a reality when Elisa Teague, the at the time senior RPG producer for Renegade, reached out to me and a bunch of other people and said, we are putting together this this new role-playing game, and it's going to be Transformers, Power Rangers, G.I. Joe, and other licenses in the future. Obviously, everyone involved in the team, we jumped on it in a heartbeat. But originally, those like first couple of conversations that we had about the project, it was supposed to be a 5e project.
Okay.
Like we were not designing our own system. We were going to be designing these licenses for 5e. And not too long into the initial kind of distribution of labor. And we had put some framework down. Some of us put some words down, but for the most part, like we were still pretty early in the production. Hasbro and Renegade came to some kind of agreement higher on the food chain than I am, and they were like, we actually want you to make your own system, and obviously, Renegade was like, that gives us, something really cool to, base anything we want in the future on that's not proprietary to, a specific, D&D set of rules or anything like that. And it also gave us a lot of freedom to make the system that because there were things that we had already said in our meetings that we wanted to be able to try and do differently, and we were going to try and figure out how to make the 5e system work in that way. And as soon as we got the freedom to be able to make our own system, we were like, okay, now we don't have to do that. We Transformers don't have to have 200 hit points. We can make an abstract health system that's more based on the cinematics of the scene than it is whether or not you've got a bloody nose. So that's and in doing so, Essence20 became, we knew what we wanted it to end as. And then it really just kind of came down to trying to make sure that everything that we were putting into it, that, you didn't add so much to the soup that the soup no longer tasted good. We wanted to make a really, really good base, to use, cooking terms. And Essence20 at its core is a D20 based resolution system, but instead of adding a static amount or some kind of like multiple D20s or anything like that, it is you're rolling a D20 and you're adding a skill. The highest result of a skill die, and your die changes based off of how proficient you are at that particular skill. And where we switched it up even further than that, I believe Ryan came up with it the first time when we were in the meeting. Ryan Costello from the primarily from the G.I. Joe team, an amazing guy, by the way. He has forgotten more things about G.I. Joe than I ever knew.
Wow.
Talking to him about G.I. Joe, first off, just the love that comes out of him about that license, but also the little things that I would have never thought about, like little licensing things like he knows which names that we can't use because they were lost in 1987 because of a TV show that didn't air, or like it's crazy. I love it. I've learned so much from him as far as that license goes, and he's also a hell of a designer too.
Say encyclopedic.
Very much so. But I digress. I think Ryan came up with it first. Was we wanted some way to not just roll a D20 plus one more die. We wanted something that would give you, there's that feel from Shadowrun of just throwing a pile of dice, and then counting up your results, but without making it about this gigantic, this number crunch of, well, I guess I have to have a difficulty level of 97 because of all of these dice. And so he came up with the concept of the dice ladder. And that is that as soon as you are specialized in something, that you are not just shooting, but you're shooting with your favorite gun, or you're not just a scientist, you are a chemical biologist and you're playing with a chemistry set. When you are that much more specific, not only do you roll your D20 and you roll your skill die that you've achieved, but you roll all of the skill dice below that as well. So if, let's say you've achieved a D6, now we'll make you even a little cooler. You have a D8 in podcasting, we'll say. You have a D8 in you have a D8 in culture is the skill. Just as a regular person, you would roll a D20 plus a D8, add it together, and if it equal to or beat the difficulty set by the game master or the instance, you would succeed. But let's say that you have a specialty in podcasting, then your culture skill check, you've spent at some point a skill level on podcasting. So you'd roll a D8, but you would also roll a D6, a D4, and a D2, and you would take the highest result of any of those dice and add that to your D20. So you're not getting these astrologically high numbers, so we don't have to completely shift the the scale of how difficult things are. It just gives you a better chance of succeeding at the things that you're doing. And then on top of that, if any of your dice, aside from the D2, if any of your dice come up the maximum number and your skill is successful, it is a critical success. And then there's all kinds of different weird critical things that can happen. More often than not, people focus on it in combat, and it just means you do another set of base damage, so your hit does that hit extra hard. But there's also a lot of things that are like, if you crit, maybe the target is stunned for a round, or if you crit, maybe you knock them prone, or in other skill sets, maybe it could be that that podcasting check, if you also critted on it, you get they say that the production value is so good that it picks up on some maybe IO9 grabbed you and forwarded your link. There's all kinds of things you can do basically to explain what that cool success was. And then the opposite, of course, is true. If you roll a 1 and fail, it's a fumble, and fumbles are bad.
Well, you say fumbles are bad, but fumbles generate something else within the system.
That is true. Someone's been doing their homework. When you one of the things that everybody on the team, which I actually had to be convinced of it. Initially, I was like, no, ones should be a penalty. And everyone was like, yeah, but this is a more lighthearted cinematic game, and it should be about if you're gonna go ahead and take the bad, you should learn from your mistakes. You should fail forward. And so a fumble, if you choose to keep it, like you don't re-roll it for any reason, or if a fumble sticks, your team gets a story point. And story points are used to either re-roll dice results of 1, as just kind of a way to sort of mitigate. Again, these games are about your character is supposed to be the protagonist. You're supposed to be who that spotlight is watching. If this was a TV show, the screen is almost always on you in some variety. And it would be a really boring show if all you did is fail all day long. So story points help you move the story along, move the plot along by succeeding, hopefully, by getting these rerolls. But it also allows you to act a little cooler than you are normally. You can act as though you're specialized in something when you aren't normally specialized in it. Or my personal favorite use of story points, hands down, every time I've run this at a convention, someone always wows me with this story point use, and that's spending a story point to come up with basically a temporary, for the remainder of the scene, some kind of tool or an object or an instance. I had a Power Rangers convention game where some guy basically used a story point to conjure up, hey, we're fighting in this guy's backyard. Does he have a barbecue? And he he spent a story point for the guy to have a big gas grill barbecue, so he could basically shoot it, blow up, and knock out like 3 of the buddies.
Nice.
And I was like, that's the kind of inventive, cool stuff that we like to hopefully foster in this kind of game, and story points help with that.
Absolutely. And for anyone that may be caught out by D2?
D2 is basically a coin flip, or evens or odds. You'll note that our stair letter goes D2 to D4, and that is a funny story, because originally the ladder had a D3 in it, because most people do recognize that a D3 is just half a D6. Elisa Teague hates D3s.
Okay.
I'm saying that here and now. She hates them, and it was the funniest meeting. We had all 12 of us in the Zoom, and we were talking about the skill ladder and how it was going to go. And she was like, "We got to cut that D3 out of there." And we were like, "Okay," figuring there was some kind of mathematic reason, or like some kind of statistics. Like there's not enough big enough switch from the D2 to the D4. It's going to throw off our numbers of skills. 100% is because she hates the
D3. That's amazing. To someone that's trying to picture what we're on about, if you go to the Renegade site, depending on where you are in the world, click on it, and you can pick up the character sheets for the various systems. I have the Transformers one and the whole Power Rangers book in front of me to work from.
Ooh.
I know. I'll be picking up G.I. Joe at some point. The character sheet is laid out in such a clear and concise way that you can read it top to bottom, left to right, without having to search right across it. It's so perfectly laid out for ease of use. And it breaks down into the 4 S's, which we could get to shortly.
The four S's or the 4 essences are strength, speed, smarts, and social. We didn't want to overdo the crunch in this game. We knew that there was going to be, because of just dealing with the licenses. There's a lot of moving parts in some of these licenses, and we knew that when it came to the setting specific rules that are going to get laid on top of Essence20, that those were going to end up adding some complexity that maybe we were trying to avoid. So at a core, we wanted to make the system itself, like the base bone system, as simple as possible. And that was literally just basically cutting a person's personality into like the compass rose. You've got your physicality on the strength side of things and the speedy side of things, and then when it comes to your emotional well-being and your like mental logistics, that's really how far we went as far as those stats go. And it did not take us long to realize that we could not use a defined scale. Because if we wanted this system to be cross-compatible, which was a goal from the very beginning, the cross-compatibility was not something that like we added in when G.I. Joe started to get fleshed together. It was like, oh, how are we going to make this work? From the very, very beginning, we knew that this system was going to be, at some point, if players wanted to have Power Rangers fighting against Cobra, or Decepticons hitting a G.I. Joe base, or later on, Equestria being, invaded by Insecticons, then that's up to you and your table to figure that out. But we wanted to make sure that the core elements of the game stayed the same. So if you picked up an Essence20 sheet, no matter what setting it's from, you have a good idea as to what that thing can do. Obviously, the specifics you'll need to know based off of that. I'm not expecting someone who's like super into My Little Pony to pick up a Power Ranger sheet and go, I have no idea what Omega Ranger does. What does Omega Empowerment do? That's kind of up to the people who are building those characters. But at a core level, if they looked at the stat of Omega Empowerment and it says they get an upshift to this and a downshift to this and +1 to this type of damage, no matter what setting they're in, they know what those terms mean. And that's really how the sheet evolved. The front of every sheet looks very similar when you look at the different player character sheets. Even the My Little Pony sheet looks very, very similar, despite having a little extra section on it for the magical friendship section. Because as we know, friendship is magic.
Of course. So these break down strength, speed, smarts, and social, and then scores are derived from them. But what is the character creation process, which is kind of universal between the systems, or is universal to the system and sort of split out?
The universal Essence20 character system you have 3 initial character elements. You have an origin, you have at least 1 influence, and you have a role. And your origin is exactly what it sounds like. It is where you came from. It is your earliest parts of life. It is the most important kind of like centralized core part of your being. A lot has changed in you since then, but it at least sets up your initial kind of concepts. And things like, in G.I. Joe, your origin comes from what kind of branch of the military, if at all, where you were plucked from to be chosen to be a Joe. In Transformers, your origin determines what kind of alt mode you when you imprinted upon something and like, this is what I'm going to be. Where your initial alt mode came from is your origins. And in Power Rangers, your origin is kind of your In the initial book, in the core rule book, it is a lot of different personality cores. Like, are you just a generally helpful person? Are you the guy who tries to make everybody laugh? Are you one of my favorites is the not from around here. That's the catch-all origin in Power Rangers. That is, you could be a robot or an alien, or maybe somebody who fell in from another times, another era of time, because Power Rangers does some really wacky stuff with some of their characters. We wanted to create kind of a catch-all, and then with future source books, that not from around here origin gets expanded upon with basically kind of new versions of itself based off of where you might be from, what kind of alien you might be. It's still that same sort of origin concept, but has a little bit of a twist to it, a little bit of an added coat of paint.
Yeah.
And then influences are important things that, up until this point in your character's existence, important things that have happened to you, important things that you've done, important things that you've lived through, something that left a mark on you. And a lot of times this will be things like maybe you were trained as an EMT. That's not necessarily what your character does, on a day-to-day basis. Maybe it does, but you could add that aspect to your character. So maybe you are not from around here, you're this robot, but you are also, you served as a medical training droid, perhaps. And then, that would add to your role, which your role is going to be your actual forward, where you get forward progression from there. Your role is more along the lines of like your class in D&D. The what spells out what you are currently doing, what you are currently capable of doing, and what you are currently trying to be better at, what you are gaining experience levels in, that sort of thing. And then, of course, origins give you a couple little powers. Influences give you a little influence perk. I mentioned that you have at least one influence. You're actually allowed to take up to 3 to add these extra little, like maybe your character just doesn't quite fit in the box of just one influence. Like, you've got this idea, you've told your game master, I really want to play this character, but I'm torn. I know his origin, I know his role. I just, it's between this and this on the influence. You can actually have up to 3, and the balancing factor, just because if there was no balancing factor, everyone just like, I'm taking 3 because I got 3 cool bonuses. Your influences for the first influence you get, your primary influence, unless, I'm trying to think if we've announced. You know what? Maybe you'll be the first. There are in future source books, there are influences that have mandatory hangups.
Okay.
Basically, the influence represents something so important, so specific, that there has to be something that balances that out. So if you choose that as your one and only influence, you would still get that hang up. But under normal circumstances, your first influence, you do not get the negative hang up that attaches to it. Your second and third influence, you get those do in fact come along with, for instance, the not from around here. Keep going back to that. The hang up for that basically is, because you are not from Earth, you're not from humanity, you're not from that chunk of humanity, you have some social hiccups, you've got some things you don't understand. There's definitely parts of your current life that are just confusing. So you actually suffer penalties when trying to deal with them. Very rarely does a hang up like debilitative. You don't look at a hang up and go, well, that makes my character worthless. It's a lot of times these hang ups are cool things to role play. Little minor rules hiccups that might happen if you're put into that sort of situation. But they all sort of reflect how that aspect of your character's life has become. If it was important enough to give you that kind of skill-based benefit, that true benefit, there's also something that life has baggage. No matter what, there's always baggage involved. And so if you start taking extra influences to add all those extra experiences to your existence, it comes with some of that baggage.
Of course. And that is broken down onto the sheet. Again, very straightforward and easy sheet to fill out. And that, so there is both mechanical and narrative benefits. There are benefits in taking hang-ups, if that makes any sense, because it as you said, it gives you a more rounded, or it can give you a more rounded or fleshed out character that you can present to your game master for, I won't say approval, discussion. This is a two-way conversation.
Well, it also, in the section we were talking about story points are not just given based off of fumbles. They're also given when people do cool things in game, and sometimes we in the GM section of the books, we actually tell the GM, if someone is really playing heavy into their character, if they're really deeply role playing, especially some of those hangups, feel free. Cool stuff deserves rewards, and story points are a great way to reward players for playing up those negative aspects of things, even especially in situations where they might not need to, but it is still part of their character. So if the cool scene happens because of one of your hangups, at the end of the scene, pop them a story point and say, that was really awesome. I didn't expect you to play up the fact that your character's been running from the law or whatever.
Absolutely. So, and each of the IPs that we've mentioned as we sort of move through the discussion about Essence20, each of those IPs have challenges they face, internal struggles and conflicts. With respect to the IPs themselves, were there any challenges bringing them into the project and overlaying them on top of the Essence20 system?
The biggest thing, so Power Rangers was the first. Hasbro gave us kind of a roadmap as to what needed to be out in order, get this done, get this done, get this done. Power Rangers was the first that needed to be out and about, and it didn't really, as far as the actual system itself goes. I think that was probably one of the more straightforward ones, because we were just basically building superheroes of a different variety. We had hundreds upon hundreds of hours worth of TV and hundreds of pages of comic book to draw concepts from, to be able to know what these characters needed to be able to do. We could look at a scene and go, I need my Red Ranger to be able to do this. It has to be, this is something that has to be available for these characters to do. And it's where a lot of the perks and powers kind of grew from, was the idea that, there's these things that we know that these characters can do canonically. So let's give them the opportunity to do it. Let's give them just, maybe vagueness. If you see a character that can throw a fireball, I might not give you the straight up perk that says throw a fireball, but we did give you Power Blast. And Power Blast is effectively a fireball, or maybe it's also like RJ's Wolf Strike, or you could find ways to make that function narratively for other characters until we come out with something more specific. And that's where a lot of this came from, is the Power Rangers laid a lot of the ground rules, and then G.I. Joe came along, and G.I. Joe is an even more straightforward role-playing entity, because you have a team of good guys versus a team of bad guys, and they fight hard, they drive vehicles, and they yo-jo. That's it's not to belittle the complexity of the world, but it's just, when it comes down to it, it is a very core concept of good guys versus bad guys, and there's not a lot of weirdness. The weirdness comes from individual characters, or maybe some of the GM plots, which we can throw into adventures and stuff. But when it came to the actual G.I. Joes themselves, they're pretty straightforward. They're trained to do something, and they're probably specialized to doing something else. They have some cool equipment, and they can grab really cool vehicles from the motor pool, and they fight a cobra. That's that we didn't have to worry about things that grow in size, or interdimensional robot tigers that link together to form giant robots. None of that stuff really applied to G.I. Joe. So G.I. Joe became kind of sort of our middle of the the baseline style for some of the other things the other games did. And then there was Transformers. Transformers was easily. I didn't work on My Little Pony, so I can't speak of any difficulties for the MLP stuff.
Yeah.
But I can say this: that Transformers was the one that we kept having to come back to, because you're dealing with things that are largely, again, no pun intended, of a completely different size. You're in unless you're dealing with a completely Cybertron based game, you are talking about robots that start at 10 to 12 feet tall and get up to like 30 in a world built for 6 foot tall people. Like it's awfully hard to look at our Earth, our current thing and go, okay, well, one of our characters is going to be a 25 foot tall thing that turns into a dump truck. Whew, okay, how's that going to work? So there was a lot of trying to reverse engineer and make that stuff function. And it really stemmed from when we were talking about how to make the giant monsters fight in Power Rangers, is how to make those fair, without just basically saying, well, they step on everybody, or you have to get into your Zords, or they're going to defeat you. We've actually, I don't want to say we've caught a little flack from it, but there's been some of the people on the Discord channels and the Facebook groups and things that are concerned that the Power Rangers can hurt the big guys when they're not in their Zords and stuff. The reason for that is because, again, we had to try and deal with things as a core Essence20 base. And if we set precedent that giant-sized things can just simply ignore attacks from little guys, that's going to make Transformers into the most powerful license in the series. There'll be no question, because basically I'm bigger than you, I'm tougher than you, I take less damage than you, I'm going to be able to school you. Or you run into, on a core concept level, a Power Ranger with a big, we'll say a Vector Blaster. I'm dealing with Time Force right now in one of the books I'm writing, so Vector Blasters are a thing. It's basically a big bazooka that shoots at the monster. If I say that big target can't be hit, or can't be hurt by that Vector Blaster, despite the fact that we've seen it in the show that it has happened, that same mechanic, when I shift it over and apply it to Gung Ho with a bazooka shooting at, I don't know, a Hiss tank, something that is large, or, even scale it up a little even further. American, the special forces guys that fight against the Transformers in
Sector 7 and all that stuff.
Yeah, thank you. For the movie anyway.
Yes.
If that means that the Sector 7 guys just can't beat the big guy because they don't have Zords to call on. So we had to figure out a system that basically made it so the smaller target, or the smaller guys, could get benefits from hitting to hit big guys, and then hopefully the big guy's stats would soak up that damage. And the reverse is also true. Bigger guys have a harder time hitting little guys, but more often than not, the bigger guys are inflicting more damage. So when they do connect, those little guys really, really do feel it.
And you mentioned sort of defeating, and this game handles. There's no, from what I've read and what I understand, there was no player death. There was no. Hopefully, there's no player death.
Hopefully, there's no player death.
There's no character death. It is all defeated and unconscious and things like that to remain in that sort of cinematic situation.
We wanted very early on. We were talking about how in Power Rangers specifically, because that was the first license we dealt with. In Power Rangers, the only time that characters like the Rangers die is when it is a extremely specific narrative point. Normally, it happens because it's the end of a giant plot line or something like that. Normally, when it comes into combat, when they get knocked out or defeated before the end of the commercial break, there's a bunch of sparks and smoke, and they roll around on the ground a little bit, and then they lay there and they're like, oh man, I'm out. And we wanted to keep that feel, but we also knew that there are players out there that are going to want to play grittier. Some of the comics for Power Rangers do get into some of the blood and viscera. G.I. Joe, everyone remembers that when Duke took Serpentor's spear to the chest. I remember being a kid and being like, oh my god, G.I. Joes can bleed. Like, that was a moment, and we all, it's still too soon. We all remember when Optimus Prime turned gray and turned to dust. We didn't want an ironclad rule of this is how characters die. So instead, we created the defeated condition, and the defeated condition varies dramatically. In our published adventures, which are only a couple of small ones are out right now, a lot of the scenes will have if the players get defeated, this happens. Almost kind of like a choose your own adventure book of if you chose the wrong page, go to jail. If the players get defeated by this particular bad guy, maybe he takes all their weapons off of them and runs for the hills before they wake up. Or maybe they're captured and there's an alternate scene in the book that says, if your players wake up in jail, here's the stats train, stage a jailbreak. But there's nothing that says that a GM, if they wanted to run a gritty game, if they wanted to run a game that was more, I hate to use the term realistic when we talk about role-playing games, but that has that sort of, there might be some red and blue lasers, but roadblocks wielding that 50 cal and it's actually shooting bullets at you. That's up to the game master to decide. It's just, they have to keep in mind that there's really no rules for resurrection. There's no reincarnation magic. It's not like a D&D game where, if you choose to play down and dirty and someone dies, they're probably dead, like dead, because that's, you've chosen to go that route. For the most part, defeated just means, unconscious, something bad in the plot has happened.
Dragged back to base, or
everyone had to, for a lot of the named bad guys, their defeated is fleeing. They when they reach the defeated state, they will spend all of their actions immediately to flee the scene as fast as possible. And then it comes down to the game master to look at the players and go, do you give chase, or do you let the bad guy, do you let Starscream, blast off, or do you follow him maybe back to the base? You could always use some of those defeats as storyline connections to the next scene.
I'd like to use a story point to put a tracker on Starscream so we can find the Decepticon base.
Exactly. See, that's and that's pretty much what we would hope would happen out of some of these games.
So much stuff there. We mentioned Starscream. We've mentioned a few others. The current core books that are out very much focus on the heroes. Definitely the G.I. Joe and the Transformers core rulebook are sort of centered on creating the protagonists. Is there a chance in the future for us to play the morally grey games and bring in the antagonists to our tables?
Absolutely. We announced at Renegade Con earlier this year that there was going to be a Cobra book, and that it was not just, initially people asked if it was going to just be basically a monster manual. It was going to just be, here's a bunch of Cobra threats. It's actually the exact opposite. It is a book based on building characters who are Cobra agents. And then there is a section that has a whole bunch of G.I. Joes and G.I. Joe vehicles and things statted up as threats.
Wow.
So if you really wanted to play a Cobra-based game, you 100%... I mean, it needs to work alongside the core rulebook for a lot of the the initial perks and things, but there's a bunch of Cobra-based perks. There's a lot of stuff that is... you would be hard-pressed to see a Joe taking it, or you could always use it as alternate cool stuff for your Joes. The ex-Viper Mercer, that particular character is one of my favorites. He probably should be built as a Cobra-based character, but then maybe throw in like one influence that is, he's a turncoat. That he He works for the Joes. This book would allow you to make that kind of character without like shoehorning in some of the weird stuff that a Viper should be trained in. This is, he has that training from Jump Street. And then relatively recently on I believe it was on one of the live streams with Renegade, but I could be wrong. I don't remember. I may have just accidentally mentioned it. But there is a Decepticon book that does the same for the Transformers license.
Okay.
Obviously, still got some time to wait on those because the core books just came out, and the Transformers core books is not even out yet. It'll be out very, very shortly based off of when this comes out. But
I pre-ordered it. I am waiting for my hard copy. I have the PDF open in front of me. So, well, what we can do there is a nice segue into where can we find your good self and everything you're associated with, socials and all that sort of good stuff.
So my socials are easy. I'm only found under two different things. At Bryan CP Steele on Facebook and Instagram, which I don't Instagram very often, but occasionally I do. You can definitely reach me there. I just don't. I don't post very much. I'm a bad social person on that one. I do Bryan CP Steele on Twitter as well, but then I am the professional nerd at TikTok and on YouTube. My show Tales from a Professional Nerd. I try to have episodes out every Friday, barring weirdness, and it's more or less me talking to a camera about the random topic at hand. I try to do stuff that people ask that they think would be, helpful tips from someone in the industry. I know I did one based on what to set up for your first, like when you're freelancing, how to avoid being, taken advantage of on your contracts. I did an entire episode on playtesting. But more often than not, it is a topic of the moment. Something pops up that's important at the time, and I will talk at great length. Although I try to keep my episodes to an hour or less, because if I didn't, I would never get any work done because I would just talk to the camera all day long. So,
all right. Well, I will make sure that all that stuff is in the description below this podcast. So scroll down and follow those links. Your most recent video at time of recording was a review of Gen Con 2022. So something.
I've missed conventions. The last COVID did a number on a lot of us that lived for those sorts of things. But this particular Gen Con was the first one that I went to. When I went to Gen Con last year, I was still with, as far as Renegade, still contracted Renegade for doing all these games, but we had not really released, like nothing had really come out yet. This was the first time that we had a full on, we had an entire room full of people playing our games. I loved swinging by and just seeing people, I would walk into the role-playing room and just sort of like lurk and see which game master screens were up at which table, and listen to. I remember someone saying something about how they yelled at Fishtail, and Fishtail is one of the Transformer NPCs that I made for one of the convention scenarios. So I knew exactly which table to look for because they were talking, one was like, Fishtail, it's your turn. I was like, oh, I love it.
Ears open.
Yeah, exactly. It was a great show. Because I am at this time I'm still just a contractor for Renegade. I'm not actually staff. So it was also good for me for some of my other gigs. I mentioned earlier miniature game. I'm the lead developer on Warzone Eternal, which is the Mutant Chronicles miniatures game that's coming out next year. And so we had I got to meet a lot of other people that up until this point were basically names on a screen or faces in a very tiny little Zoom box. So it was nice to put some names to faces and get a lot of. This one was a busy professional show for me. I didn't do a lot of like fun gaming. I did a little bit. I always try to sneak in a little bit, but I'm so ecstatic that conventions are starting to come back. So.
All right. Well, again, a link to that will be in the description. You mentioned earlier the joy of sort of grabbing a load of dice and rolling them for Shadowrun, and you released something for that which is available on Drive-Thru RPG, which I'll also put a link in the description for.
Yeah, I did. I've done a little bit of work for the Shadowrun RPG, but most of the stuff I do for Shadowrun is just straight fiction. I've done two novels, one novella, and a short story that I think is coming out next year. I think it's being put into a collection,
this kind of thing.
But I do know that one of the things I did while I was at Gen Con was I talked to their fiction guy, and they want me to do some more. So I got more of that coming.
Amazing. It's a game I've not had the pleasure to try yet, Shadowrun, but I've heard some good, some bad, but mostly good stuff about it.
I think it's on its sixth version right now, the sixth world. I like the sixth world set because it is a little more loose. It's not quite so crunchy as some of the earlier ones, but I do think that a lot of the people who played earlier Shadowrun, this rule set is not quite as tight and conformed as the earlier ones. So some of the things that they want to do and want to have rules for are going to end up being a little more flexible in Sixth World, and you kind of have to sort of take that sort of far glance at things to see how stuff works. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the system. It's just definitely a different feel than some of the last ones.
All right, well, that's fair enough. As
and the world is amazing. I have been a Shadowrun fan as far as the world goes for a long time. That same person who got me into Rifts is the one who sucked me into Shadowrun way back when. Something about him loving worlds that do everything. But it's a really, really neat setting, and if you get the right group and the right game master, it can be like nail biting tense like when you're playing the game, because there's a lot of espionage and people who are your best friend but also liars, and there's a lot of that, a lot of backstabbing going on in Shadowrun. Shadowrunners are shady.
I'll keep that in mind. Well, you've mentioned a couple of systems. You are running and have run D&D. You play test a lot of different systems. So either system-specific, say Essence20, or just game-wide specific. You got any advice for new GMs, for example, that you can draw on from your experience?
The biggest thing when it comes to GMing, whether it's the first time or the 100th time, is you got two big things to remember. Is that it's not role-playing games aren't about winning or losing. It's not a board game. It is. Sometimes the harshest defeat at the table can be one of your best sessions, but also you want to make sure that your players know from the very beginning that you are also playing this game, that you are not there to just play puppets and do everything that they need you to do. You're there to interact with them. You're there to enjoy this collaborative effort as well. It's not, even for those people, myself included, who occasionally get paid to do this, that's not what you're there for. You're there to enjoy yourself. If you leave game mastering, you go home and you need a drink after your game because it was so stressful and so hard, maybe take a breather, take a step back, let your players know, hey, this is stressing me out running this game. At the end of the day, these are games. These are supposed to be like ways to make us smile and ways to better our mental health, not feel like it should never be an obligation. You should never have to feel, I've got to run D&D this weekend. If you're not feeling it, then don't. You look at your players and go, hey, why don't we get together, same time, same place, same bat channel, and play Munchkin, play something that's brainless. Let's just, enjoy our company, smile, eat some snacks, and have a good night. I'm not in it for the game mastering right now. and you'll get back when you get back into it, and you sit down and you are ready, and you're like, all right, let's do this. I've got this great game planned. Your players will recognize it. They'll know. They'll know that you're in it. They'll know that you're not just phoning it in, and more importantly, you're having fun too. That's what this whole thing is about. Is having fun, and leaving any room a little happier than when you went in.
Yeah, definitely. No, amazing advice. Thank you for the insight. And you mentioned there about having fun and enjoying it, and making sure your players are involved in things like that. From the safety tool side of stuff, there's some referenced in the Essence20 sort of core books.
Mm-hmm.
Which of the safety tools, calibration tools, however you choose to sort of describe them, do you sort of use with your games?
I find myself in two camps. One with like a lot of my playtesters and the people I play with all the time. We don't generally need them because we've known each other for 20 years. It's I know I don't talk about this around this person. Mm-hmm. I know that if I make a dungeon filled with nothing but spiders and spidery type things, my wife is probably going to leave me. Like, that's just I'm aware that that's going to be the sort of situation, and I would just try and avoid that kind of thing at the table. Mm-hmm. But anytime that I run anything at a convention, or anytime that I run at like a game store or like a special event or a book signing or something, if I'm going to do something with people that I either don't know well or don't know at all, I like to have it's technically a gamer consent form, but I think somebody uses the term lines and veils now is the new term. I took the form from Monty Cook. I absolutely love the form that he put together. He's got a PDF of it on his website. It is just this big long set of stimuli, topics, and there's little bubbles next to it that is a red light, yellow light, green light, and basically you just fill in the bubble. And green light means doesn't bother me, I don't care if it's in the game, whatever. Yellow light means if it's brought up in game, that's okay, let's just maybe not focus on it. And if it's something that is going to be a big instance, maybe we can do like a cut to black, the building starts to burn and then we cut to black, and then at the next session we're dealing with the aftermath or whatever. And then the red bubble is something, guys, I'm just not okay with. This will be something that will help rob me of the fun from this game. And there's also some blank lines, but there's some normal stuff in there, like fire or slavery, abuse. A lot of that stuff's already in there, but there's also lines, like specifically drawn lines that someone wants to write one in. Like maybe they've got some weird thing with llamas. I don't. I'm making fun, but maybe like they literally are like traumatized by the animal when they were a child, and are like, I don't even want to think about those silly spitting bastards. Please, just I don't want it. They'll write in llamas and put a big fat X on the red. And so far, I think I've probably handed out, since I've been using them, probably 50 altogether, I think. And I've only ever gotten pushback from someone maybe once, where they were just like, I don't know why I have to do this. And basically I was like, it's for the rest of the people at the table. And, if you're okay with everything, just green dots down the road. That's it. It takes 1 second for you to do this, and cool. We're good. We're good to go. And we can move on. I've only ever had a couple of really weird instances. I had one guy's very specifically put in the notes that he is okay with fire, like fireballs, fire, flamethrowers, fire. He's totally fine with that, but not very specifically. He can't do arson. He can't do like buildings on fire.
Okay.
And after, and I made note of it. There was nothing like that in that particular session anyway, so it was not a big deal. But then after the session, I was like, hey, if you don't mind me asking, I was like, and tell me to bounce if this is prying, but you're okay with fire, like you're not afraid of fire, but you are against the concept of structures burning down. And he let me know, he was like, well, apparently his family home burnt down like 6 months before, and was just like, I don't really want to think about, I'm here trying to ignore all of that. I don't want to think about it. And I was like, awesome, thank you. And I would have never known that if I didn't have that form. And that's, so I literally, I think that I know that a lot of gamers get grief for like, I want to check my lines and veils. I want to make sure, you got the X card and all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't take long. It's 15 minutes out of a game session to get that stuff written down. And for the most part, like I said, I think most people, I've gotten all green on almost everything. And a lot of times I'll get, one or two yellows and reds in the places that you expect them to be. I'll get a lot of people that'll be like, yeah, please, let's not do any weird sexual stuff at the table, please. And I'll be like, you know what? This is a Transformers game. I'm okay with that too. Let's go ahead and put a big red X on that for me, because I don't want to get into a weird place, and that's and that's where going into that also at a convention, it helps me, because the players sometimes don't know each other either. And so if I can know this, I can see as a scene is unfolding, if something is about to happen that's going to get weird or go up against one of my players, kind of crossed lines, I can go ahead and kind of step in and alter the scene, maybe, or possibly fast forward a scene past the weirdness, and just try and make everybody's time a little better.
All right. Well, yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for everything, to be honest. Both the explanation of your good self and what you do and the products, and thank you for writing the games, and yeah, thank you very much.
To borrow a quote from one of my favorite TV shows, Letterkenny, love what you do, you never work a day in your life. That's not 100% true. I work a lot, probably more than people realize. But I love what I do, and so a lot of times, a 10-hour day in the studio, it comes and goes, like that. I'll look down at the clock and go, "Ooh, I need to make dinner." Like I didn't. My family's probably outside. My studio's in my house. And I'm willing to bet that there are times where my kids are probably out in the living room being like, "What is taking Dad so long?" Because I'm in the zone. I'm working on the next coolest thing that I want to put out, and if I've got that flow, I don't want to wait until tomorrow. I'm like anybody else. I'm a big kid. I want that cool stuff to happen now. And if it's hitting the page at a good rate, I won't stop until it's until I'm at a stopping point, because God's forbid tomorrow comes and I forget what I was doing, or tomorrow comes and I had a computer error or something. I want to make sure that it's done.
Yeah, 100%. Well, when the next of these coolest things comes out in the future, I'd love to get you back on the show to discuss this and so much more. Really.
Oh, absolutely. I would love to. I have never met a microphone I didn't like. I think the next big thing is the Transformers core rulebook. I think is the next one that's gonna drop for everybody. Although I did hear just before Gen Con that Adventures in Angel Grove, the first adventure campaign arc book, which so the adventures that came with the Game Master screens are designed to be basically kind of like one shots. Not one shots as in narrative, but like you can more or less play that in one setting, maybe two. They're not real big, huge, deep. They're a single structure, a single story structure. The adventure series books, which currently we've announced 2 of them. We have Adventures in Angel Grove and then Operation Cold Iron, G.I. Joe. There is one for Transformers, but I don't think we've announced it yet, and I probably shouldn't say it.
That's fine.
Just I don't think marketing is cleared before it yet.
I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm just here to
but those are much bigger books. Those are like the kind of thing that's multiple adventures connected together that could bring a character from like 2nd to 5th level, or second, like first to 6th or something like that. Basically giving you a good narrative head start on getting into that world. And there's one of those planned for each of the licenses. And then the source books come after that. The first source book that I know of that is on its way, that we have announced, is Across the Stars for Power Rangers, which is the Essence20 look at space travel and exploration, plus a bunch of Power Rangers in space stuff.
No, it all sounds very cool, and I will definitely invite you back when more and more of this stuff gets announced and released. And yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it.
I would be glad to come and talk about cool stuff. This is one of the reasons why I love going to conventions, is getting a chance to talk to people about things. And in this case, I get to talk to lots of people all at once. I just can't see them.
That's fair enough. I did the G.I. Joe, slight tangent, but we're still on track. The Emerald Oubliette, the G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
I had to double check and Google what an oubliette is, and then I became terrified. And now I'm both curious and terrified to have a look in that module. I will be picking it up because it sounds, the artwork looks amazing, but it sounds like a lot of fun as well.
When our team divisions happened and we knew what we were going to be in, Elisa said, I said, I was like, I really want to make sure I do something for G.I. Joe. And Elisa's like, can you smash out an adventure for the GM screen? I was like, absolutely. And I love, there are certain aspects of Cobra that I think are some of the neatest things from, growing up with the toys, and I got to play with some of that. So
very jealous.
This is someone on the Discord said it, and I want to try and I want to try and figure out who it was and steal that phrase and just like use it as a byline and everything. Is that Essence20 is not a toolbox, it's a toy box. And that is exactly like when he said that, I was like, that is 100% what we were aiming for. Is I want, when someone says their Essence20 bookshelf has this, and this, is just like when I was a kid. And through that, I'm going to share, my toy box was this really dumb plastic elephant and the top of his head came off. So like the elephant's head comes off and I reach in and I grab a fistful of G.I. Joes and, Scorponok and be like, all right, Slaughter's Marauders are going after, Scorponok today. That's the kind of thing that we want Essence20 to be able to do. And that, more importantly, I want to be able to hear back from people when they say, I had a game this weekend and Starscream got eaten by the red Tyrannosaurus Zord. And I go, that was a great day. These are the kind of things, the stuff that when my son's almost 14 now, and he's just now getting out of that age range where he doesn't really play with his action figures anymore. But I remember on the floor of our apartment of when he was playing with all these toys and these ridiculous scenes that we would come up with, and these weird rules that he would just spout off and be like, no, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle can jump this high because he's purple. Okay, all right,
sure.
And when you're 6, that's a big deal. And that's the kind of stuff that I love to hear about. And what I want to think people are doing with Essence20 is I want someone to be like, I'm recreating all of those old action figure fun moments, and hopefully all I can do is cross my fingers and hope that people higher in the food chain do these things. Is that I want more licenses for Essence20. I want Renegade to grab just as many things that they can add to that toy box as possible, and then let us go crazy as players and gamers to just fill the parts of our lives that need happiness with that same sort of 6-year-old joy of explaining to me why Donatello can jump on top of our TV.
Yeah. I have a few ideas, old cartoons and stuff. I'd love to be. Yeah, no, because that's another 2-hour conversation of childhood Saturday morning cartoons. Bryan, it's been such a pleasure. I will make sure there are links to everything in the description below. I highly recommend people go and join the Renegade Discord. The chat on there yourself often pops on and chats with people in the various chats.
Every day, Monday through Friday, 1 hour a day. It is part of my job description. Initially, it was just to basically smooth over some rules mistakes and things, some layout issues with the Power Rangers book. But it has turned into something that I enjoy. I like getting on there and talking shop with people and helping them with their game ideas, or someone will find that they'll get that sort of that plot stop point where like, I just don't know how to make this work. I love being able to be like, well, this is what I would do. You don't have to, obviously, but if I was running that game, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
And there are so many great people on the Discord. Our community is Jordan Gata is Renegade's community manager. He kind of like runs all the socials, and he has done a fantastic job of making sure that it's a safe place, as far as like, you're not going to get in there, and with very few exceptions, you're not going to get in there and get yelled at. The moderators do a really good job, and there are times where I will log in for my office hours, and I'll go back and look at people who have asked me questions, and there will already have been the players and things that have come forward and been like, hey, it's cool, we got this. Here's the answer. Here's what this is. There's no definitive answer in the raw, but these are the couple of things that we might be able to do.
Yeah.
And very, very rarely have I seen someone come onto the Discord, the Renegade Discord, and leave upset. They might be confused, to hopefully be ironed out later. But like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone like chased away. And I've definitely been on gamer Discords in the past that the communities are angry, toxic, oh, another noob has showed up, and this is not like that. The Renegade Discord servers are fantastic.
Yeah, that's partly why I'm still there. So I will make sure to invite you, your good self, or other members of the Renegade team. But I've enjoyed speaking to you, so I will direct an invitation directly back to you as well. And it has been an absolute pleasure, Bryan. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
It is my pleasure. I can't wait to get back. And if you ever want to do an episode specifically on G.I. Joe weirdness, I will help you get in touch with Ryan. Ryan would eat that up with a spoon.
I will take you up on that offer after this. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you very much, Bryan.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about the show, then go to www.snydersreturn.squarespace.com. Alternatively, you can find us over on Twitter @ReturnSnyder. We have a Linktree link in the description of this episode. And if you want to support us, come and join us over on Patreon. And we also have a Discord server. Please leave us a review, because we'd love to learn how to improve the channel and provide better content out for those who are listening. Until we speak again, thank you.